Welcome to Healthy Lifestyle with Lorianne. I am Coach Lorianne, America's #1 Take Action Success Coach and Strategist, empowering, educating, inspiring, and igniting people to take action with jet propulsion, assisting people to find and embrace their life purpose, live their highest vision, become the best version of you, and forge a strong foundation to soar to success. For more information about how to work with me and my team, visit us at ldcstrategies.com or coachlorianne.com. Our goal here at Healthy Lifestyle is to empower minds, educate hearts, inspire action, and ignite success so you can choose to have a fulfilled, healthy, emotional, spiritual, and physical life, to live the life you have always wanted and dreamed. What we like to do is bring you a little tidbit of different people who are doing wonderful things out there that you may not have heard about, and now you will, so that you could decide to possibly engage with them. So today I'd like to say welcome to the show. I have on our show today our guest Dimitrios Loukakis. He is going to light us up with verbal caffeine. You have no idea. He is a Los Angeles-based voice and communication specialist. I have to do well today. Everybody listen. With a mission to coach others to become more confident and competent communicators. After being trained and working as an actor in London, UK, that's right, London, UK, wait till you hear his voice, you're going to be infatuated. Dimitrios went on to complete an MFA in voice studies at the Royal Central School of Speech and Drama, University of London. He has taught actors, journalists at universities throughout the UK and the US, and has coached numerous public speakers and presenters. Dimitrios trains individuals to speak about their ideas in inspiring and strategic ways while fostering a learning environment where his clientele can come away with practical communication tools that can be applied immediately. He has excellent track record of working alongside companies like Microsoft, TDK, and others to amplify their message through public speaking and storytelling. Welcome to the show, Dimitrios. So happy to have you on.
I'm very happy to be here. Thank you. Thank you.
So glad you're here. See, I told you, isn't it a great voice? Yes, yes, yes. I loved your voice. I was actually telling a friend of mine, I was like, I love speaking to Dimitrios because I love just listening to you. You could speak for hours and I'd just be like, okay.
It's fun speaking. I also enjoy listening, by the way. But yeah.
Well, today we won't have a chance to listen because I want you to speak. So I love that you're a communication specialist. You help people speak, you help them build their confidence and just getting up in front of rooms or just speaking to other people when they're networking. And I understand you have a lot of speaking engagements across the country that you're doing this year. One I know of in Las Vegas that you just completed at a convention that you did and rock the room. So that's really exciting. But so my question is, right off the top is, what's the most important communication skill for leaders?
I'd say the most important communication skill would be having a practice session, having a practice, a systematic way of practicing. It is starting by building your self-awareness. It's so often that I said at the beginning, you meant, when you introduced me, you talked about the difference between competence and confidence.
Yes.
And I would say confidence is a very experiential thing. And sometimes we feel confident, and it doesn't necessarily mean that we are competent in it as well.
So true.
So often, for example, if you were to, say you go in someone's car and you're not really sure about their ability to drive. And if you were to tell me like, hey, how are you as a driver? If I was to tell you, I'm very confident driver, that would not reassure you necessarily.
That would not make me comfortable.
No. So it's not necessarily just about like feeling good about it, but it's also about how we come across. So in terms of the best skill is developing a systematic way of monitoring how you're coming across. And I say that generally the best way of doing that is not by receiving feedback from someone, but a combination of, yes, some feedback, but also camera and a mic. so that you can get to see and hear yourself. And a lot of people hate it. I understand it. It's not, we don't feel comfortable with it, but absolutely it's a very important skill
Without a
set.
doubt, it's in your face. You can't walk away and say, "Oh, I was really good. Wait, I just saw myself not so good."
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
I didn't. I said this, but I really meant that. And the only way you can really get better at what you do is really being self. And I mean this in a very positive way, being aware and critically looking at what you're doing, not in a beat yourself up way, but in a, okay, I can do this better. Okay, let me shift and maneuver this way. Let me pivot to that. And I think that's an important element. I love what you said, because in my coaching, I talk about awareness. We can't change something unless we're aware we need to change it. So,
Mhm.
yes, I've seen many speakers recently who went up there and they were very confident, but they were not competent. And they may have been subject matter savvy, but they weren't really good at explaining it and getting it across to the people who were in the room.
Absolutely. The way so often we really know what it is we're talking about, but we don't necessarily know how to communicate that. And
Yeah.
that is one of the biggest blind spots out there in education,
Yes.
because a lot of people who know, for example, I mentioned earlier that I work with actors. Sometimes you have like a big celebrity that is coming and doing workshops, and they sell out very quickly because everybody knows, well, if they made it, they can help me make it, which is a false assumption,
Very
because
cool.
it's a very different skill to have to make the other person a better actor versus making you a better actor.
Yes.
So the concept of education and training is a skill in its own right, which tends to be overlooked so often.
Yes, without a doubt. Yeah, just because I do it doesn't mean I've broken it down enough to know how to teach it. And that's the thing. And a good actor shouldn't break it down, because that actually changes their juju. That
Mhm.
changes their mystical magical power, because now they're overthinking it. And unless they can get out of their own head, they're overthinking it and they're going to mess up their own ability and their own genius, their that magic that they put out there. So yeah, it's really important to have that competent coach that allows you to do that. What was your journey as a coach? How did you become a coach? Because here you are teaching all these people, and I'm talking about major actors, and you're over in the UK and you decided to become a coach. What happened there?
Um, the general, I worked as an actor for a while. I trained as an actor in London, and then I worked for about 5 years. And after 5 years, I realized that it's actually not as fulfilling as I thought it was going to be. And this to me is a big exercise in was a big exercise in something that another thing that we tend to overlook, which is the ability to let go.
Yeah.
I was like, I know a lot of people who stick to something because they're like driven, but it's like, when does drive and kind of going, I will do it and keep pushing, when does it become stubborn? Where is the line where you kind of just ignore all signals around you and you go, I will just keep doing that no matter what. And then 20 years later, you realize maybe you've made it. And you kind of go, well, actually, what this ended up being is not what I thought it was when I was 16.
Yeah.
So why did I keep pushing based on an idea and a decision I made back then? So again, it's kind of like, it's intentionality and being conscious of how that journey has it shifted. Do you need to change?
Do you have any
Change.
growth in it? Is there growth? And that's that industry, that in the music industry. I'm a singer, so that in the music industry is very, very based on ego, because it's you under a microscope, so it can make and break people as well. So it's very, very difficult, because it's hard not to take it personal. It's
Mhm,
hard not to take it personal that they don't cast you. It's hard not to take it personal that they don't use you, on their tracks or something like that, because
mhm,
you feel like it's a reflection of what you can do, of your capability, but that's not it at all. A lot of times, the reason why they chose somebody else to do it has nothing to do with your capability. I actually know better musicians who haven't made it, air quotes, made it, and they would kick some of the musicians that you see in some of these bands out on tour. They would
mhm,
kick their butts. They would
mhm,
be like, they would level them if you put them up on stage next to each other from a talent aspect. But it was just a different route that they went. So I love that you say that we should we need to become aware of when is it enough? When is that time to turn and pivot into something else and say, this isn't what I think it is? A lot of times, do you think that people witness people doing this and they get that image, that starry-eyed image about what that really is, because that's how it's depicted in the movies, and that's not it at all? There's a lot of work to being an actor.
Yeah, I think our mind is incredibly competent in filling in the gaps. So we see something and then we create a story around it. It's very easy if I was to say like, I don't know, Friday night dinner, and people will start having images and ideas, and we're filling the gaps. We create stories in our heads, and we are bombarded with the idea of like, hey, being an actor or being a musician, being a singer is this. And once we start embodying it, we realize, oh, maybe it's something. That's when reality hits. And also, it could be like this
Yes.
for somebody else in
Yes.
a different country, in a different
Yes.
place, or in a different whatever, or it's just for somebody else.
Yes.
So you kind of need to start experiencing it. And that's what I did in my journey. I experienced it, and I was like, surprisingly, the thing that I disliked the most was lack of creativity. I actually did not feel creative.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying it's not a creative profession per se. It's just I did not feel creative. So what I ended up doing is I remember having like a 3-month run at the theater. And after the first month, I was like, it was halfway through, it was an interval. And I was thinking, well, we've got about an hour left. Great. And then I can go hang out with my friends. And I'm like, my job should not be like that. I should not be thinking about when this is going to end. I should be thinking about focusing on what's happening in Act 3, like, so what
you weren't present, you weren't engaged.
No, not really.
Yeah.
So then and that also made me not a great actor. I don't think I was fantastic. I think I was focusing too much on, getting the job, and I get the job, and then I'll be like, okay, but now I want the other job. I wasn't really enjoying it.
Yeah.
So I was kind of chasing it. And then I started training a friend of mine back then. It was an attorney, immigration attorney, and he was getting up and he was like, I don't know what to do. And I started giving him some simple acting exercises, things that I knew from the world of theater because I decided to be an actor when I was 10 years old. So I'd done like workshops and things like that, all sorts, and been to drama school and studied theater, the university.
Stanislavski method.
Stanislavski, all of that, different stuff, different approaches to movement and voice. So I started like applying some of this stuff, and he was like, oh yeah, that's very helpful. I'm like, Thinking back, I didn't know what I was doing, but it was something that made a change. And I remember going back home going, this is more fun for me. I actually really enjoyed this. So gradually,
let me just stop you for a second. Yeah. You enjoyed it more. Why? I know the answer to this. You enjoyed it more. Why?
For me, I enjoyed it more because I felt like I was getting the creativity hit that I wanted. And B, it felt like I was helping somebody else in ways that I wasn't able to do as an actor.
Yes, you were serving someone else and you seeing the direct response, similar to an actor where you get the applause if you're doing live theater.
Yeah.
You were getting that direct response back of watching them be successful with the tools that you were giving them.
Yes. And I felt that the work was more meaningful. I'm not dissing actors, fantastic work they're doing.
Yes, absolutely.
I felt like what I was doing had a type of a value that I also didn't know I had in me.
Yes.
So this started becoming like a regular thing. Every week I would go, forget about Zoom. I'd go to his place. That was about 11 years ago. I'd go to his place and would do that. And then actually I ended up thinking, I want to take this seriously. And I don't know how to take this to the next stage. So I started I applied to get into a master's degree for voice studies.
Master's degree? I love that.
Sorry?
It sounds so fancy when you say it, a master's degree.
Master's degree, yeah. It was a 2-year MFA program.
Yeah, sure.
And that's where you started going really into the depth of things, of actually, first of all, understanding voice, not just tangibles and intangibles. So tangibles being anatomy, physiology, acoustics, the kind of like science part of that, and the intangibles, which are things like voice as a sense of identity of who you are, of expressing yourself in the moment. What does it mean, the first cry in the world? When you first come into this world, you come with a cry. Wailing, crying, all these are sounds, right? So we're studying that from an emotional perspective, an identity perspective of who you are in this moment.
Yeah.
And also a huge part then the academia, the research, conducting and kind of all of that. And then pedagogy, which is essentially goes by many names: adult learning theory, the process through which brains process information, so the learning.
Right.
So all these things in one in one degree. And 2 years later, I graduated, and I graduated with distinction, which was the first time. I was always a terrible student throughout my life. It's the first time I actually graduated with distinction. I didn't even aim for it. I didn't even look at the marking criteria. I was just like, I'm going to write an essay that I think is good.
Yeah.
I'm going to coach someone in a way that I think is good.
Yeah.
And I ended up being rewarded for that, which was wonderful.
Because you were doing it from here, you weren't doing it from here. And I'm pointing to my head for our listeners, is that you were doing it with your heart. You were engaged, and this is what you're meant to do. And so when you're on the track, I always say, when you're doing what you're supposed to do, you lose track of time. You lose track of metrics like becoming a distinct, right? Attaining those levels. Metrics don't matter. What matters is you're learning and you're getting it. And you're just like, I want more. I want to learn more. I want to be able to take this and help other people. And then you see their reaction. You just want to keep doing that. That's when you're doing what your soul's purpose is. That's when you know you're in your purpose. A lot of people don't know how to decide, like, how do I know I'm in my purpose? That's how you lose track of time. Time is just a man-made element.
I know. And isn't it terrible? Isn't it terrible that sometimes you have to stick to that, especially like when you teach for a school or whatever, then you like, that's it. And the moment it's like 2:00 and it's the end of the session, you have to finish, because then you have the room against you a lot of the times. For me, at least, I find like you start eating, no pun intended, from people's lunchtime.
They get cranky.
Then they're like, oh, it's lunchtime. So you always have to. I've become better at dealing with time and like time management, but generally, yes, it's a challenge when you get really into it. It's a sign of it's called flow state, or being present. It's normal. So if anyone's listening and their practitioner or coach or facilitator is losing track of time, perhaps you can be a little bit more generous, knowing that they're probably means they're really into what they're doing. So,
yeah, I lose track of time all the time. I actually put a timer on because I love what I do. I would spend hours with each of my clients, but I don't have that ability, nor is that a really good way to run a business, right?
yeah.
But yeah, that state of flow and loving what you're doing. One of the things I really, it was just very apparent when I met you, is you're so cerebral and you back everything up with, you have scientific information if we want to have it. If not, you don't jam it down our throats. Love that. You give us tools. That's great. But you do also have this immense sense of humor. And I love that you incorporate humor when you do presentations and when you're working with people. You incorporate that sense of humor. You incorporate who you are into the teaching. And I love that, because some coaches are out there and they're kind of monotone. And you hear me. I try to use every area of my range, all the way from lower all the way to my highs, and it just depends on where I am in excitement. But I love that you incorporate that sense of humor. So where did that come? Do you realize that you do that? Because you're hysterical. And yet it's like you remember it because it was just so funny that it really becomes it stays with you.
I don't do it consciously. I have to be honest. I'm not really conscious of cracking jokes, but a lot of the times I enjoy it. I have fun, and when I have fun, then funny thoughts come in my head, and then I share them, and then I start. Sometimes, to be honest, sometimes I'm the only person laughing. I'm going
yes,
like,
me too.
And then people laugh at the fact that I'm laughing at my own joke. I have this.
I'm hysterical. Just ask me.
I kind of throw kind of puns out there. Which is like, it's a make or break. Some of the terrible puns. So you kind of laugh at the fact that that you make it really unfunny. Is they're so unfunny they become funny.
Exactly. And they're so obvious, oh, is that a pun? That's really funny. And people are like, what now?
Yeah, don't get me started on that. Sometimes I try and filter because I overdo it. I have even categories of puns with countries with
that's
kind
awesome.
of like,
You and I have to do a pun off.
Totally. And perhaps let's spare the listeners.
Oh yes, please. They'll turn the radio off. So
they'll turn it off.
Do that to you guys. We won't do that. But it would be fun for us.
It would be fun. Totally.
I love my puns and my movie quotes. So those two things you're going to catch me in.
Oh, nice.
Movie quotes. Yeah, I used to have this game with my brothers. They would, when they went off to college, they're 10 years older than I am, and they would go off to college and they would call and they would quote a movie and hang up. And I had a certain amount of time. And back then, don't do math. We didn't have the Google, right?
Yeah.
I'd have to come up with the actor's name or character and the movie that it came from and call them back within a certain amount of time. And this is the game we would play back and forth. And this is just how we stayed connected. And it's hysterical so cool. Because, it's really cool because you're like, well, now you have the Google, you could cheat. It's easy. So it's not as much fun. But back then you're like, wait, I know this one. And you could picture the actor's face, but you couldn't go back into it. You are listening to Healthy Lifestyle with Lorianne. We are on JVC Broadcasting and iHeartRadio. We're going to take a short break and come back with Dimitrios and speak more about what he does and how he can help you. See you in a few. Welcome back to Healthy Lifestyle with Lorianne. I am Coach Lorianne, America's #1 take action coach and strategist. If you would like to be a guest or lift up your business or product or non-for-profit, or if you have a question or a comment, we would love to hear from you. Email us at healthylifestylewithla@gmail.com. That's healthylifestylewithla@gmail.com. Love to hear from you. Now, we are speaking to Dimitrios Loukakis, and you can find him at Dimitrios Loukakis.com. All the information is with this radio show and this program. So just find it below and you'll be able to go and meet him. And I do really recommend it because he really is a good guide, especially you coaches, people who want to be speakers, who are writing books and are going to have to go out and do interviews. You really want to work with someone like Dimitrios because he's going to be able to take you to that next level. And he's going to be able to take that nervousness out of you and give you that confidence so you could speak with confidence and be confident at the same time. With that said, and thank you and welcome back, by the way.
Thank you.
I use storytelling when I do my speaking engagements and when I go out and teach big groups. I use storytelling because we all know that storytelling is easy. Stories are easier to remember and to connect with, right? So how does one use storytelling as a powerful tool of influence?
So the first step is that generally you have to start with the end in mind. So it's a little bit like a pilot. You'd want to know where you're going to land before you take off.
Yeah.
Okay. So
yes, please.
So the first is like, what are you trying to achieve? Are you starting with intention? Storytelling is a tool of generating energy. So without going too much into the science, we talked about briefly the science, there's been plenty of studies that connect storytelling, intentional storytelling, with the production of a very important neurotransmitter, a hormone that's called oxitosin. Now, oxitosin, for those of you who don't know, is a hormone that is so important at creating bonding. It's actually naturally secreted during breastfeeding and other situations, and it creates bonding. It is a great hormone, and they noticed increase in oxytocin levels with intentional storytelling in a few different studies. We're not going to go too much into the details.
Yeah, I told you guys, very scientific. Yeah. It's great, though. If you want the science, Dimitrios is the one to go to.
So look at it as a little bit like an energy that generates, a machine that generates energy. Now, where this energy is going to go, you can take energy and like spread it everywhere and achieve absolutely nothing, waste it everywhere, or you can channel it towards something. So we need to have, whether that is a specific call to action or a message that you'd want it to be memorable, you need to start from that. not from what the story is, but from what the message is. We know that the same story can be told a million different ways. We can have different perspectives. You can say the same story from one person's perspective and somebody else's perspective. You can emphasize certain components of the story versus another component of the story. A story is not a police report, which means it's not an objective, this happened, this happened, this happened, but it's a subjective narrative structure. So if we know, for example, that I would like to emphasize the fact that my message is something that relates to the quality of my product, and I am specifically selling a product, and the emphasis of that is that this product does not break. Okay. Now, the story that I'm going to use has to be connected to that throughout.
Sure. Yeah.
So
yeah, it has to be like a string throughout your whole speech. You have to make sure that there's a connection.
Exactly. Yeah. And what are the moments in the story where I can reinforce that message about my product not breaking? So I can weave it in the story throughout the narrative to make sure something is repeated, because the more it's repeated, the more it's likely to be remembered. That would be the first step that I would look at. So start with the end in mind first, and then see with that, based on that end, where in your story you can begin to incorporate that message here and there in order for the audience to keep reinforcing that message in your audience's minds.
Can you give us an example of a story like that tell us what your intention is and then tell us a story, short story?
Mm-hmm. So I have a story of my own, and the story is about letting go, about the ability to let go. And I will give you a shorter version of the story, I think, just for the purposes of this. The story is that I am with my partner at the time, and I wake up right next to her. We've had communication problems, and it's about us getting in the car. We get in the car because we want to start doing something together, taking a dance classes, because we're trying to build our relationship back by starting a new hobby together, start building some experiences. Yeah. And we get in the car and it's raining, and but as we get in the car, we're running because we woke up late, and I'm kind of getting upset about it, and I rush her and she doesn't want to be rushed, and she ends up getting coffee with her. So there's a lot of panic in the story as I tell it. And then we get stuck in traffic. And at this point, it's bumper to bumper. I get frustrated. We start shouting at each other. We're not even listening to each other at all. And we get stopped in our tracks by seeing the reason why there was all this traffic on this wet day is because there's been a traffic accident, and there's a car in front of us, an SUV that's been overturned. And I say, amongst shattered glass, there is a yellow rubber duck. A yellow rubber duck on the ground among shattered glass. And that stopped me in our tracks, and I start getting very emotional because I start thinking of potentially a child that was in that SUV. And as we drive off, we actually didn't make it. I say we didn't make it to the class. We never actually made it to the class. But we ended up being quiet, and we started thinking internally what was happening. We were pushing to get to the class, to save a relationship that we'd already marked and destroyed before through all the arguing and shouting in order to make it on time. Right. And it kind of taught me a huge part of that in a world, and I say in a world that pushes you to achieve more and push more and keep going and ignore everything and never give up and push. We lost touch with our feeling of letting go, knowing when to let go. Yeah. I kind of finish a story like this. Now, of course, this story could be about so many other things.
Sure.
The story could be about relationships. The story could have been about, how to drive even. The story could have been about waking up earlier. The story could have been about never rushing. The story could have been about so many.
Yeah, it could also be about you got caught, universe, God, source however you refer to your higher power, was giving you that traffic jam to have a conversation while you were in the car and you couldn't go anyplace else or do anything else. So
Absolutely.
it gave you potentially, if you saw what I call whispers and nudges, it gave you a sign that this is, well, let's talk about it now before we get to the dance class. Let's talk about how we're going to communicate and stuff like that. Then that you're not doing that, I'll take that story even further. Then it gave you caution to pause of what's important. That accident, that could have been a child, that gave you a perspective of what's important in life. So many things were in that
Yes.
story. How
Yes.
beautiful that you
Yes.
can take that one story and change where we're going to pivot and, focus on. So,
Focus on. And that's probably the most important thing, is that one of the biggest misunderstandings in storytelling is that is knowing that storytelling in the world of arts, when it's implicit, it's rewarded. It's a good thing. We don't want to be spoon-fed the meaning of a movie, right?
right.
If we all go to a movie, we'll all think, oh, this was about this. We'll think about different things about the movie. And that's great in the world of art. In the world of business and intentional, where there's intentional messaging, we can't afford that. We have to be explicit. So we need to understand the difference between business storytelling and storytelling in the world of the arts. And in business story, we need to say, so, and give them what is that main key message of our story, so that we have zero risk of people either not understanding it, so wasting all that powerful energy, or understanding a different meaning that I didn't intend them to, which works against me. So we need to be very explicit about it.
Yes, beautiful. Yes. And that's the difference between a good speaker and not a good speaker. And I've had people go up, and I sat there through the whole thing, and I'm thinking, and of course, being a coach, having coached people to do things like this, I sit there and I was like, okay, where are you going? When I'm sitting there thinking, where are you going? Where are we going with this? Where are we going with this? Then the speaker's not doing a good job, because the people in the audience need to come with me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to send them on a tour without them understanding where we're going, similar to the pilot. Otherwise, we're going to be, look, kids, Big Ben, Parliament. We're going to be going round and round and round. We don't know. We don't have any way to get off of that merry-go-round, so to speak, or that rotary. So it's real important to be clear on where we're going. And so I usually, like you said, you start with the end in mind. You tell the story, so you kind of put the exclamation on it so they remember it. And now you make sure the application is right, because people can interpret, like you were saying, you can have a different interpretation. So you need to be the control, especially as a speaker. And whether you're teaching or speaking in front of a group or a moderator, you need to be in control of that moment. And the only way you could do that is storytelling like this. So I love that. That's very powerful. Why do you call it influencing?
Because
Taking them in a direction?
Because you're taking them in a direction, yes. It is so common that again, it has to do with their intention. Whether it's, I mentioned at the beginning, I mentioned either a message they'd like to remember or a call to action. They're both a form of influencing, and we can be intentional about it. If my job is to just entertain, I am still kind of influencing, but I'm not leading them. I'm not leading them towards something tangible, something that makes business sense as well.
Right.
So that's why I say specifically influencing, because through oxytocin and other actually hormones that are being released during storytelling, we're forming a bond, a connection, which means I'm now put myself in a position where I'm leading my audience towards something. And that something is really important, which is why we need to know straight away from the beginning, where is it that we're going?
Yes, beautiful. So I love how you really engaged me in the story. Like, you took me for a ride on the story, and that's a really good story. That's a really good movie. You get the ups, you get the downs. You were taking me absolutely on a ride. I was very intense, and I actually lost track of time. And when you were doing that, no, we're good. But
Okay.
I lost track of time while you were telling the story. So how do you teach people to bring stories to life? Because have you ever seen a speaker or been in a room when it's just like, dear Lord, land the plane? So how do you bring those stories to life? And I love that you did that.
So, how do I bring stories to life? It is actually some very specific tools Do you mean like when a story doesn't really work, is not very engaging, like how to make it impactful and engaging? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Just sort of, yeah. So a lot of it comes to levels of priority. So the first priority is the structure. Do we know where we are, for example?
Yeah.
Do we know? So if in a way, if I don't set the scene for the audience, it doesn't matter what kind of fancy flashbacks and other kind of like storytelling tools I can use later, if I don't understand what's the basics of what's happening. So first of all, lead them through the basics. Notice where it is, when it is, all of that stuff. Your guide throughout the whole thing, the whole storytelling, is your currency. Your main currency is images that are created in your audience's minds. If something does not have an image, it's unlikely to take them somewhere emotionally as well. So you need an image. So the difference, I said, for example, in my story, I used language that is more likely to create an image. If I say, for example, glass, if I say shattered glass versus broken glass, that's a different quality. So that's when we go deeply into the words, the vocabulary that one is using, and certain vocabulary is more likely to create an image that is more specific and sharper in my audience's minds than other vocabulary.
Yes.
So then we're going into deep. But the first part is absolutely knowing where you are, your context, what is actually happening before then you go into the technical components of potentially sentence structure or a more vivid language that is more likely to be memorable for your audience.
To take you on that ride. Yeah. Because that's what it's about. It's about creating those images and taking them on a ride and speaking from a place where they can connect. So if I talk about something that someone can't connect, I was in East Oshkosh. If nobody in the room has been in East Oshkosh, they have no idea what I'm talking about.
Exactly.
So no relativity for them. So, it's like talking to you about my friend Deborah. You don't know what Deborah looks like, so you have no connection to Deborah, so you don't really understand. And chances are you're going to be, when we speak about Deborah again, you're going to be like, now who's this again? Because you don't have that face to place with the name, to place with what I'm speaking about. So that connection is important in the speaking. That's great. That's great. So one of the things I notice is, as speakers, sometimes I notice that people don't read the room. And reading the room is important too. Is we decided we're going in like this, and it probably would be better to go in like this if I read the room. And I've been in a place where I came in to teach one topic, and in speaking at the beginning, which I usually do, to the people in the room, that wasn't the appropriate topic, even though that's what I was hired to do. And I ditched the whole presentation and maneuvered over to a different topic. And I was dead doggone because I was listening to the room. So that brings me about to, how do people listen better? How do you teach people to listen better? It's so, so important.
So listening better and reading the room are kind of cousins. They're not exactly the same thing, but they're cousins. So specifically about reading the room, for example, my first questions would be around logistics, around when the speech is taking place or where it is. If you've got bright lights on you and the audience is in the dark, you have less visual cues. So we kind of like need to analyze and figure out the circumstances. I love logistics generally because they tell us a lot about, because we can imagine like, oh, look at the people in the eyes, blah, blah. If I can't see them, then what do I do, right? So the logistics largely determine what your action is going to be. Let's push that to the side and go into listening. Listening better. I'm speaking also from a person that should neurologically not listen as well as a diagnosed ADHD person. I get distracted very easily. Now, that should not mean that I'm not going to put up a fight. I'm going to put up a good fight, and I'm going to try and listen as best as I can. And how do you do that? There's a few things that you can do, and the first thing comes from the environment. So say you're about to have a very important conversation, and it is vital that good communication happens. Perhaps you're about to speak to your partner, or you're about to speak to your boss or a colleague about something that is actually really important. Focus on the things you can control. What can you control, I hear you ask? And that is the environment. A lot of
what can you control?
Yeah, what can you control? So you can control the environment, first of all. So are there any distractions? So many times, places with mirrors, avoid them absolutely. We end up looking at yourself in the mirror. I've tried to have good conversations in a sports bar. Moving screens in the background will attract my eyes, and all of a sudden I get distracted again. Making sure it's a quiet space. There's not too many distractions in terms of, like, if you're in the middle of a floor where there's like lots of different offices, people on the phone, etc. Not a good place. So find a place that is distraction free as much as possible, and focus mostly on audio-visual distractions. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's the first component. The second component is, don't assume that you can listen well. Always assume you're a terrible listener. Assume that you're not doing a good job. Because what this does, first of all, it will get you to really focus and listen harder. And secondly, they'll do the check-in, which is a very common thing, comes from the world of counseling, I suppose, is to feed back to the speaker what your interpretation of what they say is. And ask them, am I getting this right?
Yeah.
So it's usually creating this, having this, I'd say, healthy amount of ambiguity about what is happening when two people are speaking to each other.
Yeah.
It's kind of like saying, it's on a first level, I think it's this, but I think there is more that's happening here. And it could be that you are checking in, you say like, hey, so what you're asking me here to do, for example, if I was to ask you, what you're asking me here to do is ways to help our audience listen better. Does it check in with you? The person that you're asking this to will be like, oh, great, this person actually cares about what I'm saying. They actually want to listen, and they want to make sure they understand me, which is great for your connection.
Yes.
And at the same time, you checking in with yourself that what you heard is actually what you think you heard is actually what it is. It's what the other person is saying. So check in with them, and you could eventually also check in with not just what they say, but how they say it, how they're feeling about it. So I notice you're a bit upset about it is also another way.
Yeah. I like the check-in element. Oh my gosh, this has been so great, Dimitrios. I'd love to have you back on. But as always, I'm a Take Action Success Coach, right? So I'm going to ask you to give our listeners in this last minute something that they can take action with right now, and take something from you that they can add to their life right now, right today, like as soon as they're done with this radio show.
No matter what you're practicing, if you're practicing public speaking or storytelling or anything that requires you speaking to communicate something, make sure that you set up the systematic practice technique. Set up a camera, record yourself, and practice in as close to the real world circumstances as possible. So in the same way that if you were practicing swimming, you would not just practice in your living room, you'd have to be inside water. In that exact same way, set up the camera, stand up. Don't just look at your slides and your PowerPoint in your desk and mouth the words that you would say. Actually stand up, walk up and down the room, see how you may actually walk, how you might use gesture, and film yourself. Watch back. Be kind to yourself, don't be critical, don't get the whips out, and notice one thing you're doing well and one thing that needs improvement, and move from there. Thank you very much also for inviting me.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for being on. It's dimitriosloukakis.com. All the information will be below on this episode. Thank you for being here, and thank you all for joining us today on Healthy Lifestyle with Lorianne. I hope we've earned the privilege of your time. I really want to thank our guest today, Dimitrios Loukakis, unbelievable speaking coach, communication coach. Look for us at our next show next Saturday at 3 p.m. on JVC Broadcasting and iHeartRadio. We also can be found on all the major platforms, and would be so grateful if you please like, follow, share, and subscribe. Until next time, I am Coach Lorianne, America's #1 Take Action Success Coach and Strategist. Let your dreams be bigger than your fears. Let your life be filled with joy. Play a higher role, serve a higher purpose, show up for you, and show up big. Bye, everyone. Have a great day. Thank you so much.